What's up guys, Deluxe Basketball Analysis here back with another player comparison video. This time we'll be looking at two of the top forwards in the league today in Kawhi Leonard and Giannis Antetokounmpo. This in-depth comparison will look at a total of 9 categories, those being scoring, efficiency, defense, passing, rebounding, leadership, team impact, value, and head-to-head. We'll add all those up, and of course the higher score wins. Do keep in mind though that this comparison specifically is only for comparing who is better in 2020, not in years past, so previous categories like accolades and competition, for example, will not be included in this one. So please, do not use their accolades, competition, or really anything that's related to their overall career numbers or facts. This will determine who is better in this season in 2020 only. And with that out of the way, let's dive right into it. Scoring. So starting with scoring, we see both players are unquestionably two of some of the best scorers in the game today. Looking strictly at their points per game this season, Giannis has a slight advantage here, averaging just under 30 points a night in 2020. But on the flip side, don't sleep on Kawhi, who still put up a phenomenal 27 points per game average. Now we know both players score in very different ways. Kawhi for one relies on his footwork and fadeaways, mid-range pull-ups, and reliable three-point shot to score, whereas someone like Giannis on the flip side, without a jump shot, relies on his pure frame and athleticism to get buckets, most notably in the paint with finishes or dunks. However, regardless of how both players get the ball in the basket, just know that both these guys are top 10 in scoring averages with their points per game this season, Kawhi being at 9th and Giannis in 3rd. But with all that said, I am giving Giannis a small 1-point edge here due to it being a noticeable difference, but a fairly small one. Efficiency. With their scoring averages now out of the way, let's quickly look at how efficiently both players get the points that they score. For some context, both players are at least top 32 in all-time true shooting percentage, so both right off the bat have been very efficient scorers. But looking to strictly this season, starting with Giannis in 2020, he has a true shooting percentage of 60.8%, landing him at 24th in the league in overall scoring efficiency. Considering his shooting output of 20 shots a night, that is pretty impressive, especially without having a reliable or consistent three-point jump shot. Looking to Kawhi on the other hand, this season he has a true shooting of 58.5%, which is 48th in today's NBA this year. That is certainly above the league average this year of around 56%, but is down from his career average of near 60%. Regardless, this will earn Giannis a score of 8.5 and Kawhi a 7.5 for efficiency. Again, a difference, but one that is fairly minimal. Defense. Starting with Giannis once more, we see he has averages defensively of 1 steal and 1 block. He also has a defensive rating plus-minus of 2.73, which is first amongst active listed power forwards and 6th in the NBA overall. This season, his steals and block averages are actually the worst since his first and second years in the league, but this is a perfect example showing that just strictly steals and blocks aren't everything when it comes to overall defensive impact. In fact, he of course also is in the running for Defensive Player of the Year this season, which is very impressive considering he still scores 30 points a night on the other end of the floor. Now over to Kawhi, who is also known for his amazing defensive prowess as a small forward in today's NBA. In 2020, Kawhi has averages of 1.8 steals and 0.6 blocks. He has a DRPM of 1.24, which is 9th amongst active listed small forwards and 48th in the NBA this season. Now that is a bit surprising that he's not higher in DRPM, but it could be explained partly due to him saving his best defense for the playoffs and not the regular season. Regardless though, his defensive stats aren't bad at all, in fact of course considerably above average. But even though Kawhi has more steals and blocks, I more so value that DRPM as it gives us a much clearer picture in terms of defining who has an overall larger defensive impact, with more hidden and overlooked things such as deflections, guarding effectively without getting a steal or block, etc. However, I'm still taking into account Kawhi having more steals and blocks per game overall, which shortens the gap, but Giannis still gets a 9 here, and Kawhi this season gets an 8 for defense. Rebounding. Now going to rebounding, let's take a look at who crashes the glass more effectively. In 2020, Giannis Antetokounmpo averaged an insane, get this, 13.7 rebounds per game in 30.9 minutes per game. That is honestly unreal, considering all the other amazing things that Giannis does. Being also third in the league in total rebounds per night is pretty insane, not to mention that his minutes per game isn't even that high at all. In fact, Andre Drummond, who leads the league in rebounds per game at 15.2 a night, has a minutes per game of 2 higher than Giannis at 33 minutes a night. So Giannis isn't as good a rebounder as Drummond, but regardless, his rebounding is actually very impressive and is the highest average of rebounding in a single season for his career. Now back over to Kawhi, we see he has an average of 7.3 rebounds a night in 32.2 minutes per game. Now that is not on Giannis' level, as we see he has almost half the rebounds in more minutes per game played than Giannis. However, that is tied with his best rebounding season, being in 2019 in Toronto, at the same exact average of 7.3. But the difference between the two players is still very obvious here, and it's a big one. I'm giving Giannis an unquestionable 10 in this category, and Kawhi a 7 for rebounding. Passing. Once more beginning with Giannis, we see he put up a solid 5.8 assists a night this season in 2020. Being one of Milwaukee's prime ball handlers and distributors, Giannis does a great job in finding the open man for dimes pretty well, especially considering how many points he scores every night. Now back to Kawhi, and this season, he has averaged an also solid 5 assists per game in 2020 with the Clips. Now that may not sound all that impressive, but take into consideration that passing is not really what Kawhi is out there for on offense. He's really only asked to be a primary scorer in LA, not as much a distributor of the ball, so big kudos to Kawhi there. But the big surprise here is that not only is this Kawhi's best season in terms of passing, but he also averages a whole turnover less per game than Giannis, which will help Kawhi catch up big time in this category. Honestly, taking into consideration turnovers per game, even with Giannis averaging more assists, it cancels out for me. Some of you, however, may be wondering how many of those 3.7 turnovers per game Giannis has is due to his passing, and which ones are to be attributed to his scoring, especially due to Giannis having such a high scoring output. Not all turnovers are because of bad passes, because remember, you could get it stolen in an ISO situation, for example. But don't worry, I have something addressing that issue in the team impact category coming up later in the video, as it takes into account both players' scoring plus assist to turnover ratio. But for here, I'm giving both players a 6.5 in passing due to Kawhi's less turnovers. Leadership. This time, let's start with Kawhi Leonard. So Kawhi on the Clippers this season has shown the usual amount of leadership in LA this year as in recent years past. He has been the clear established leader on the Clippers in 2020, leading them to the 2nd seed in the tougher Western Conference. Now Kawhi, as we know, has led his teams mainly through his scoring abilities, and this year is much of the same, as he is their scoring leader. Kawhi, though, has also stepped up big time with his passing this year, as mentioned in the passing category previously. Of course, we know that Kawhi is not big on verbal leadership, as that's something he could use some improvement on, but other than that, he gets the job done with setting a great work ethic example. Going now to Giannis, we see he has been their clear leader by far this year. He has led his Bucks to the 1st seed in the East, in fact the best record in the NBA. We all know he leads them in scoring, and is a main ball handler and distributor as well. We also know the insane work ethic Giannis has shown, and that sets a tremendous example to teammates. In this year, I honestly don't think looking at their leadership subjectively gives one a real advantage over the other. They're both about business, about getting the job done. They don't care about individual awards as much as some other players do. They're all about getting championships. I'm giving both an 8 in this category. Team impact. Now this category is one I am implementing for the first time. Team impact is designed to help more accurately pinpoint who the better player is, strictly through individual metrics and stats. This also, as I mentioned earlier, will address the turnovers problem with passing as it relates to scoring. This category is out of a total of 30 points instead of 10 and is divided into 4 sections, those being PER, points and assist to turnover ratio, which will be both out of 10 points each, and then RPM wins, aka wins contributed, and PIE, both being out of 5 points. If you don't know what these stats mean exactly, just know that they help pinpoint who is more impactful for their teams overall, but you can of course look up exactly what each one of these metrics means if you don't know. So now, let's begin with Kawhi. Kawhi this season has a PER of 26.7, which is 5th in the NBA, and a points and assists to turnover ratio of 11.81. He has a wins contributed of 6.63, which is 10th in the NBA, and a player impact estimate of 19.3, which is 6th in the NBA. Those gave him scores of an 8.5, a 9, a 4, and a 4.5. And he ended up with a total score of 26. Let's compare those numbers to Giannis, who had a PER of 31.6, which was 1st in the NBA, a points and assists to turnover ratio of 9.57, a wins contributed of 15.09, which was 1st in the NBA, and a player impact estimate of 23.9, which was 2nd in the NBA. This landed him with relative scores of a 10 for PER, an 8 for points and assists to turnover ratio, a 5 for wins contributed, and a 5 for PIE. This gave him a total score of 28. Giannis gets a 2-point advantage in this category, meaning that he has a good advantage over Kawhi in terms of overall individual team impact, but it's not a huge difference. However, Giannis' PER this year at 31.6, mind you, is actually 7th all-time in NBA history for a single season. That's even better than Stephen Curry's 2016 unanimous MVP season, which is 9th all-time. That is literally unreal, and Kawhi's PER this year is 120th all-time, just for reference. And remember that turnover issue with points and assists? Well, Kawhi won that by 1 point due to averaging a whole turnover less, despite his fewer total combined points and assists. Regardless, both these players are extremely positive, impactful players for their respective teams. Value. Now to the second to last category of value. This one measures how valuable each player is to their team, say if they were taken off of it, and how much the team would suffer because of it. Starting with Kawhi this time, we see no doubtedly he is essential to the Clippers' title hopes this season. Take Kawhi off the Clippers, and they stand no chance against their other LA counterpart in, say, the conference finals. They'd kind of be a team reminiscent of perhaps Paul George on the Pacers in the mid-2010s, with one superstar and depth being a threat to make the finals, but likely not make it. Giannis, on the other hand, take him off the Bucks, and even in the weaker East, Milwaukee would still suffer immensely. Without the Greek Freak, the Bucks would have only one star, but would likely lose in the second round at best, likely the first even. So, I'm giving Giannis the edge here, but I am taking into account how the West is still the much better conference, but Giannis still gets a 1-point advantage here. He gets a 10, Kawhi gets a 9. Head to head. So finally, we have made it to the final category of this comparison, and this one is very straightforward. It's how each player fared against one another literally in the games they physically played against each other this season. Now unfortunately, Kawhi was out for the first game they played, and because of that, I'm only making this category in this specific comparison out of just 5 points due to less significance, but Kawhi did play in the second game. On December 6, 2019, the Clippers faced the Bucks on the road in Milwaukee. Here are each player's stat lines. In 29 minutes of play, Kawhi put up 17 points, 5 boards, 4 dimes, 2 steals, and 2 blocks with 5 turnovers, with a true shooting percentage of a very low 51%. Giannis, on the other hand, in just 26 minutes of play, dropped a monster 27 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists. He had no steals or blocks along with 4 turnovers, but had a decent true shooting of 59.6% for his standards. As we can clearly see, Giannis did play much better in this specific matchup. He put up more points, rebounds, and the same dimes in 3 minutes less of play. Kawhi put up those steals and blocks, but shot poorly from the floor that night. I'm giving Giannis a score of 5 and Kawhi a 4 in head-to-head. And so, after adding up all 9 categories of this comparison between Giannis Antetokounmpo and Kawhi Leonard in 2020, here are the totals. Giannis ended up with a grand total of 95 points and Kawhi Leonard with a score of 85 points. So, this comparison has come to the conclusion that Giannis Antetokounmpo is the better player over Kawhi Leonard in 2020. Now, this was actually very surprising for me. This is the largest difference in terms of scores between 2 players I have had by a long shot. I'll be honest here, I did not at all expect this difference to be this big. I did believe before this matchup that Giannis was better, but not by a whole lot. Now this comparison was out of 105 points, and Giannis scored a total of over 90% of all available points, meaning he averaged a 9 out of possible 10 in every category. Absolutely insane. Now please, Kawhi and our Clipper fans, I can 1,000,000% assure you that this entire comparison I created was 100% unbiased. I tried as much as I could to make it as much about the stats as possible and the least about the subjective to help pinpoint who the better player is based as much off the objective. I'm sure almost all of you would agree with me that this was very unbiased and fair for both players, as I very diligently went through every category multiple times to make sure everything checked out. However, if you disagree, feel more than free to debate me in the comments section. Please keep it civil. But a big disclaimer for this specific comparison is that I do in fact believe that Kawhi is coasting a bit this season and saving most of his energy for the playoffs. I understand that Giannis is actually in fact averaging less minutes per game than Kawhi this year, but compared to some recent years, especially defensively for example, Kawhi has not been performing up to par this year with his usual standards. This of course is not an excuse for Kawhi here for this comparison, but I will say it certainly had an impact. Whether that be big or small, I don't really know, but I know he's coasting a bit. Now, with this comparison being before the playoffs this season, having playoff performance as a category is of course not possible yet. But I will tell you with 100% confidence that even if Kawhi goes on a rampage in the playoffs, Giannis will still be the better player. However, if Giannis chokes or something and they lose even before the finals, that might be something to consider. But other than that, I'd say Giannis is still better, by a pretty considerable margin in fact. And one last thing before I let you go, before you dislike this video if you disagree with the end result, please know that this was 100% unbiased, I promise you. This series of comparing players is not to be a punch in the face to the fans of those of the player who lost, it's meant to be for unbiased comparisons to spark friendly and civil debates amongst basketball circles, and to show by the numbers who is a better player out of 2. So if you did enjoy this video, or if you learned something new, please thumbs up this video as it motivates me to keep making more content, and also shows me what kind of exact videos or content you guys would like to see more of. And with all that, this has been Deluxe Basketball Analysis. Thanks so much for watching. Sub if you're new, hit the bell, and peace out.